Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Eniagolu. Let's turn to Afghanistan now, where 3 days after entering the capital, Kabul, the Taliban have announced a general amnesty for government officials, urging them to return to work. Correspondents say slowly some control is being established in Afghanistan, with the Taliban deploying more forces. At the international airport, military evacuation flights carrying diplomats and other civilians have now resumed. Flights were suspended on Monday when hordes of desperate people tried to access aircrafts to flee the city. The British Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has said the Taliban must be held to the commitments they made at the Doha talks now that they've taken power in Afghanistan. He said that included the promise not to let its territory be used for terrorism. Well, Settar Mengli is a correspondent for the Associated Press. He's been monitoring developments in Afghanistan, and he joins me now from Kabul. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. First of all, what more can you tell us about life in Kabul and across Afghanistan generally? I mean, we're hearing that things are slowly returning to normal.
Well, today is the third day of Taliban took over. They basically came to the front gates of the capital city, Kabul, but they weren't entering inside city. But because of the violence inside city and robberies, Taliban officials declared that they're gonna get inside the city, and they came to the city. Today is the third day. So far, there hasn't been any major conflict or any shootings inside city, but the city is pretty much calm. Kabul is usually a very hectic and a busy city. It's usually packed with traffic and people in the street. But as we see, there aren't many people in the streets. And Taliban officials also announced that the government workers or the other institutions workers could return to their work and continue their lives as normal. But people are insisting on staying inside. Yes.
And I mean, thank you for painting that picture. It's brilliant that you're in Kabul, so we get a better sense of what life is actually like there. But what about the ease of movement in Kabul? I mean, can people walk and talk to other people freely, or are they stopped and restricted in their movement?
Well, people are insisting on staying inside, but there are people, of course, outside as well. They are trying to live their lives, and some of the people have actually opened their shops and they're doing their work. But it is not as usual. A lot of people are fleeing from Kabul. There is a rush, and there is a traumatic rush in the airport. Airport is there are two different parts of airports. There is a military and civilian part, and the civilian part is just unfunctional. It's not working.
And we heard today the Taliban saying they are giving amnesty to all the government workers. But it's a strange choice of words, isn't it? I mean, one assumes that means they're trying to imply that people won't be punished for having worked for the previous government. But is it also an admission by the Taliban that they can't run the country by themselves?
Well, yeah, people are concerned by their ruling, and people, most of the people, government workers, have already fled, and they are looking for ways to go out. But yes, Taliban officials have released have released that there won't be any harm to the people working in the government institutions or in other private sector. They have declared that everything is going to be all right for them, but people are still concerned, and they are looking for ways to go out of country.
Well, absolutely. And of course, there'll always be a Taliban person in charge of all the different government departments. And that must be a rather fearful prospect for many government employees. Plus the fact that no one knows what they'll do 6 months down the line when they get enough of their own people to run these ministries.
Yes, it is very early to say what is going to happen next. There is an uncertainty among people, but it is for sure that they have declared that government employees can return to their work, including women. And there are reports that some of the Taliban officials are actually visiting hospitals, and they are giving permissions to nurses and other lady doctors to work in their positions.
And you mentioned women there. There's been concern about girls and women. What indications are you getting about how they're being treated? I mean, we've seen women journalists, for instance, interviewing senior Taliban officials, which would have been unthinkable 20 years ago.
Well, yes, foreign journalists are probably interviewing the Taliban officials, but so far we don't see local female journalists going out. And as far as we see and the reports we get, there are female government employees returning back to their work, but it's very few. It's hard to say. It's hard to say anything about their number, but it's for sure that their numbers have decreased. Most of the government employees have already fled the country, and there is still rush going on in the airport.
Right. You mentioned, I was going to ask you about the airport, but you've sort of answered that question now. But what about things like music and the posters of women on the streets of Kabul and the general noise there? I mean, has that changed in the current circumstances? Because somebody was telling us that the posters of women are being painted over and you can't see any women walking on the streets without men.
Well, yes, there aren't many women walking in the streets of Kabul. We don't see that, and we haven't heard of any, for instance, any of wedding halls being functioning. And I believe people are very concerned about these things that you've just mentioned, but there is no official release or any statement from the Taliban side that these things are banned or you can continue doing these. People are just waiting. They are concerned and very curious about what's going to happen next.
And obviously that's what everyone wants to know, what happens next. Settar Mengli is a freelance journalist talking to us there from Kabul in Afghanistan. Thank you very much indeed for that update.